All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2023. This is day number 4. So, today, I mentioned that Daily December is about me trying new things, expanding my abilities, and kind of stretching myself as a creator. I have had an idea for a little bit for a new series, I guess, on my channel. And the thing that kind of inspired it was, if you guys have been watching my channel for any amount of time, my discovering new dragons and designing new dragons. I really, really enjoy those. Some of my daily December videos are going to be those videos. I haven't figured out what the next system I'm going to do is just yet, because I've been really focusing on launching my Fabula Ultima campaign. That being said, I'm eventually going to run out of RPGs. I mean, technically, yeah, there's tons of really tiny, small RPGs that I could probably keep going for years and years and years and years, but I would probably get burnt out long before then. So, I had another idea about tabletop RPGs in general, which is basically find something that already exists that doesn't have its own tabletop RPG, and do an episode where I basically go, okay, if I was going to turn this into an RPG using rules that already exist, I would use this system, and these are the changes that I would make to make it feel more like this system. I have no idea what I would call it yet. But this is going to be the first episode of unknown named new show that, if you guys enjoy, may become a regular thing. I don't know. I might use it to kind of pad my time between discovering new dragons, just because it does take me a little while to learn a new system well enough to do a discovering new dragons on it. And so, anyway, so if you've read the title of this video, you probably can figure out what I'm going to do, and that is we're going to take the Legend of Dragoon, one of my favorite PlayStation RPGs, and I am going to modify some rules for Fabula Ultima to make it work pretty well as a kind of tabletop substitute for The Legend of Dragoon, where if you wanted to play a game in that world, I think this would work pretty well. Quick reminder, I don't do this anywhere near enough in my Daily December videos, but if you're enjoying this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. Let's start off by talking about The Legend of Dragoon. For anyone that doesn't know, The Legend of Dragoon is an RPG that was released by Sony. I think it was Sony Online Entertainment. I can't remember. Sony made it. They were the publishers, and they made it. It has never really. It has never received a sequel. It has never received a remake or a remaster or anything like that. They did just add it back to the PlayStation Store. So you can play it on PS4s and PS5s. I think when it first launched, there was like a game-breaking bug, but they fixed that. So, and it's a phenomenal game. The basics of this story is there's this world where millennia ago there was this massive fight between humans and this race of creatures called the Winglies. And the Winglies inherently have the ability to use magic, and they have these like energy-based wings that can let them fly, and the humans didn't. And so to kind of battle the Winglies, they formed kind of pacts with dragons. This king that I can't remember his name right now, they picked, I think it was 7 dragoons. And they each had like an elemental affinity. Like there was a red dragon, he had fire powers, and there was a black dragon, and they had death powers. And there was a green dragon that had wind powers, and a brown dragon, and it had rock powers. Rinse and repeat. There's purple dragon. He was super cool. The newer one, his name is Hostile, and he punches people, and I like monks. So anyway, the game is set again millennia in the future, and this character named Dart goes to this prison to save his childhood friend and sweetheart from this empire that's trying to use her to do world-ending things, because she's apparently really special, and I won't spoil the whole plot of the thing. And then you basically go through this entire campaign that involves a lot of kind of politics, because you have to deal with kind of the politics of the war, and dealing with history and magic and betrayal and all this really cool stuff. And the last 2 discs are a little bit rushed, which kind of sucks, but overall it's a really fun thing. And probably the 2 most defining features of the game are the addition system and the Dragoon system. The addition system is basically, unlike normal turn-based RPGs, when you choose to attack someone, there's actually a little button prompt that comes up, and if you push it at the right time, the attack that you're doing will do an additional attack. And depending on which addition you are using, that can turn into 6 or 7 different attacks. And every time you get the button press correct, it does more damage. You get more resources from it that you can use to turn into Dragoons. We'll talk about that in a second. And they can level up and get more powerful. And if you max all of them, you get a final one that's really cool. And so for a normally very I don't want to say boring, but for normally like turn-based RPGs are normally very, very strategic. There's not a whole lot of action required for them. It's much more strategic. This one kind of blended a little by that action and strategery. And it was really fun. And then the other kind of unique aspect is, slight spoiler alert, each character that joins the party eventually gets the ability to turn into a Dragoon. And Dragoons have access to really powerful magical spells, and there's this cool Dragoon transformation thing. They do more power, or they do more damage. They have the magic spells. They take less damage. They become elemental, and elements have resistances and weaknesses and things like that. And so in certain situations, like if you're fighting an ice monster and Dart turns into his fire Dragoon, then you can hit the ice monster for more damage. So it's your basic RPG, and I love it. The music's amazing. The gameplay's super, super fun. And I have been thinking a while about how I could turn that into an RPG, and kind of the things that feel the most Legend of Dragoon-y. So, that being said, obviously, you've read the title. I'm going to be using Fabula Ultima for this for a number of reasons. One, it's already meant to emulate JRPGs like The Legend of Dragoon, so it already has a few things in there that are going to make it work. Things like the battle system is literally a turn-based RPG. The players are on one side, the bad guys are on the other, and you don't have to worry about maps or minis or anything like that. You just choose who goes first, and it's a very strategic tactical, or it's a very strategic style of combat, because moving your characters around and making sure that they're not in fireball formation doesn't mean anything to this, but choosing the correct order for your characters to move in, manipulating who gets to go first and second and things like that, those are all really, really useful. And making sure that the whole team is using their abilities that are going to synergize with other people, that's where the strategy for Fabula Ultima comes in. So we already have that. And then they do actually have a class in Fabula Ultima that I think fits the Dragoon with a few modifications to it based on a recent playtest that came out literally just a couple days ago. So the first thing we're going to talk about is additions. In a tabletop RPG, you can't really replicate additions per se. Because you don't want to add some sort of action thing that they have to do. Like, you don't want them, like if you're doing it remotely, you don't want them to have to click a button in time or something. Or if you're doing it, live, you don't want to have to get them out of their chairs to press a button or do a dance or anything like that. So for the most part, I haven't come up with a good way to put additions in as far as like the active aspect of it. But I do have some ideas on how to give characters different ways to kind of make different attacks that still feel very powerful. So one of the ways to do that is just the class system in and of itself is really built on kind of customizability, and because you just have kind of an attack action, there are so many different ways to kind of change how your attack action works. I think that's what we can use to kind of replicate the additions. And basically, every time you take a skill that gives you a different way to interact with people, you can just name it as a different addition, and that will give you kind of the flexibility of the fact that for the most part, additions were literally just that. Additions just gave you the ability to either do more damage or that. There are a few that had some slight, like I think Muru had one that actually had a possibility of charming someone. I think she might have been the only one that had that. But in that particular aspect, I think that's probably where the additions could have done more, where different additions could have done something else other than, well, this one gives you more SP, or this one just does more damage, or this one's easier to do. I think they could have done more stuff. So to give an example, the Weapon Master has quite a few different abilities that just change how your attacks work. Blade Storm gives one of your attacks multi, which basically means you can hit multiple targets. So that is very simple to be able to see as an addition. Bone Crusher allows you to inflict status conditions or reduce their mind points instead of doing damage. Breach allows you to effectively either destroy bits of their armor or make them vulnerable. Or not technically vulnerable, make them take a little bit more damage. So by basically renaming Blade Storm as like one of the additions for Dart is called Burning Rush. And if any of you have ever played it, you know that every time at the end of every edition, they will always call out the name of the edition, which some people got annoyed with. I loved it every single time. So you have like Burning Rush and Volcano, or Gust of Wind Dance. So very easily, I could see something like Blade Storm being attributed to something like Gust of Wind Dance, because if you ever did the Gust of Wind Dance edition, it had like 6 or 7 button presses, and if you were doing it on Albert, it was wicked fast. Like you had to go boom, 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 boom. It was so cool and it's so much fun. And at the end, and throughout the whole thing, Albert uses a spear, and so you watch him just go hoo-cha, hoo-poo, and he spins it around, and he flips through the air, and does all this cool stuff, and at the end he goes, Gust of Wind Dance. So using something like Blade Storm and just calling it Gust of Wind Dance, and maybe encouraging your players that when they decide to use an addition, that they actually call out the additions. That, to me, fits that feeling that you get from the additions without doing something that's just not going to translate super, super well to tabletop RPGs. So that is what I call a reskin. That is a massively simple thing that it's really just changing names. It doesn't require rebalancing or anything like that. You're just changing the name of something to make it feel more like what you're looking for. And like I said, I chose the Weapon Master because it has a lot of different things that gives you the ability to just fight differently with weapons. There are obviously other things that you can do as well. And you can even reskin spells if you want to make them work if you want more variety in the different additions that you can have. But I think the big thing there is whenever you take a skill or something that you want to be one of your additions, you need to just take a few moments when you first take it to pick an addition, whether you want to use one of the additions that already exist in Legend of Dragoon, or if you want to create your own. Give it a name, give a description of what it looks like. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it's like, I'm I'm going to call this one, like the name of the skill is called Blade Storm. So you can just use the name. It's like, well, I'm going to call this Blade Storm. And what happens is I run forward and I slash with the sword, and then I bring it back around, flip it, and then spin with the blade 2 or 3 times. You know, just something small like that makes such a big difference, because then every time it's used, everyone who already knows the description can kind of see it in their mind, and it becomes that little more cinematic. And it also gives the DM something to, or the GM in this case, something to go with, because one of the things that most of the GMs that I play with, and especially what I do, is to make combat more entertaining. You're going to narrate the combat. You're not going to say, "Oh, you hit. You do this much damage." You know, if one of my players starts to attack, like I have this happen a lot in my Legend of Three Kingdoms. One of the players has a gun that they got from another player character that died in the campaign, and he kind of took that as a way to remember them. And so the gun's called Fury. And so he'll go, so I'm going to attack this guy to twice, and one of them, and he has the ability to kind of make elemental shots with it because of a magic item I gave him. Or actually, I gave the magic item to the character that's no longer there, and this character just stole it, and I never was expecting one character to have that, like, I was expecting that character to have that particular, and it was weird. Anyway, so what would happen is he goes, so I'm going to attack this guy, and he'll just say what he's doing, and I go, okay, so for the rest of you, you guys watch as Argenta reaches into her coat and she pulls out Fury. You watch as she opens the chamber and loads one glowing red bullet and one smoking blue bullet. Locks it back into place. You see her aim down the sights. The first fire, what did you get? That's definitely a hit. The first shot fires. You watch as this streak of red goes and slams in, and you see this small explosion as the creature's arm is thrown back. You see this gaping hole on their shoulder. What's your second attack roll? Oh, that one hits too. And then you watch as another one hits him right in the chest, and you watch as the skin around it starts to crystallize and freeze instantly, and as you see frost just burst out of the wound. And I do stuff like that, and it makes combat that much more interesting for everybody involved. And so just by having particular attacks that we're going to call additions, that you kind of have, okay, this is what the attack is. The GM can take those and go, okay, well, this is the situation that we're in, so you're going to do the same movements basically, but I'm going to describe how it affects these creatures differently than the last creatures that you used it on. So, yeah, so that's the additions. Moving on. Now, the second thing, and probably the thing that most people think about when they think of the Legend of Dragoon, because it's in the name, is Dragoon transformations. Dragoon transformations are a massive, massive part of the game. And the way that they work in the game is basically every attack that you do charges up this bar. And once it reaches 100 points, you can transform into a Dragoon for 1 turn. And as you gain levels and as you use your Dragoon, it levels up. And eventually you can collect up to 500 SP is what you use to do it. You can collect up to 500, meaning you can stay in your Dragoon form for up to 5 turns at a time. There isn't a Dragoon transformation method built into Fabula Ultima. However, there is a class called the Arcanist. The Arcanists themselves is designed to basically be the Fabula Ultima representation of a summoner. And summoners from like Final Fantasy are basically, instead of casting like fire, Fyra, Fyraga, they summon creatures. There's some kind called espers. There's some kind called summons, guardian forces. They call them different things in every single Final Fantasy game, but it's the same basic thing. It's a large, powerful creature that generally costs a lot of magic points, much more than your standard, standard spell. And when you do it, there's a little animation, And then they generally either will do an attack that hits everybody, or they'll give the entire party some kind of a buff. And that's generally how they work. And so that's how the Arcanist was originally designed to work. But because tabletop RPG is a little bit different than a JRPG video game, they made it work a little bit differently. They have an ability called Bind and Summon, which basically means you meet an Arcana and now you can summon that Arcana. It takes a pretty decent amount of your mind points to be able to summon it. And then what happens when you summon the Arcana is you merge with it. And every Arcana has what's called a merge effect. One of them might be you have resistance to fire damage, and any fire damage that you do ignores resistance. Or another one might be you get a bonus to your magic defense, or things like that. And then they also have a dismiss effect. And the dismiss effect is kind of what the old version of Final Fantasy summons used to be. Is the summon goes away after this, but as part of them going away, it does this huge damaging attack, or it does something really, really powerful to justify the fact that it costs a butt-ton of MP. Because of that merge effect, I think the Arcanist can work really well to basically simulate having a Dragoon spirit. Because while you have the Dragoon spirit on, you can have the merge effect, which allows you to do everything. Like Dragoons can fly. That's one of the big things about the Dragoon. So you could say, while you have this particular Dragoon spirit, while you're merged with it, you can fly. You can you can have resistance to your elemental ability. All of your attacks do that particular elemental damage. Things like that is not particularly difficult. Compared to the Arcanum that are listed in the core books, these Dragoon transformations are probably going to be slightly more powerful. But the Arcanum that are listed in the core book are examples. Dealing with them that way and treating them as examples means that you can modify them and make it so that it works just as well. So if you treat the Arcanist class as basically your Dragoon levels, as you gain levels in the Arcanist, you're going to be able to do things like use your Dragoon transformation more often, because there are ways to lower the cost of summoning. There are ways to use it to regain hit points. And even there's a ritual thing where you can use your Arcana for rituals, which is basically ritual magic in Fabula Ultima is basically any non-combat spells. If it's not listed in the book somewhere, it's a ritual. And so you could very easily use ritual arcanism to use your Dragoon spirit to do things like, well, I need to fly up there and, break that crystal that's powering this Wingley city. Okay, we can use a ritual for that to kind of justify you being able to do something like that. Or, I'm going to go Dragoon and I'm going to lift this massive pillar off my friend here. That just happened when one of these mega creatures just blew up a tower. Things like that. You can use rituals to kind of take care without having to create brand new rules for when you're in Dragoon mode, when you're not. You can just kind of cover a lot of that with ritual arcanism and make choices based on what you're doing and things like that. And that means your mind points basically become your limiting factor that prevents Dragoons from just always being in their Dragoon form and being massively powerful. However, a few days ago, the creator of Fabula Ultima, he has a Patreon, and he releases playtest material like every month, basically. And the playtest material for December was published, I think, yesterday or the day before. And a part of this playtest material was a rework of the Arcanist. Because while it works okay as it is in the core book, it's a little bit underpowered. Again, summoning a creature takes, basically for a first level character, if you take Arcanist as one of your first levels, you are going to use almost the entirety of your mind point pool on a single summon. And then while you have them, what they found through 2 years of playtesting is a lot of people were summoning their Arcanums and not really using the merge effect very often at all. What they would do is they would summon them and then they would immediately dismiss them to mimic the aspects of summoners that we've seen in Final Fantasy and Bravely Default and a bunch of other RPGs. That's how they work in those Giga games. So this rework changes how it works. First of all, it makes the summons a little bit cheaper. And second of all, it adds a new ability to summons called a pulse effect. This is basically a special ability that you can only do while you are merged with the Arcanum. So you still have a merge effect. So while the Arcanum's on, you have these passive abilities. You now have a pulse effect, which is an attack or something. You can only use it in conflict, so it is designed for just doing damage and stuff. And then you still have a dismiss effect as well that's generally a little bit less powerful because you now have this pulse effect, which is basically a free attack. And the pulse effects that exist vary pretty greatly, but they're all kind of interesting. Like one of them, there is a new sample arcana, which is kind of this time and space creature. And so the pulse effect is you can deal 10 fire damage to a creature you can see, then you can deal 10 ice damage to a creature you can see, and those can either be the same creature or different creatures. So you basically get this yin-yang of fire, ice, and you can do that as long as you are merged with the Arcana. And that kind of describes how they work. You'll summon the Arcana and immediately merge with it. That's what summoning is. And you get your passive benefits. You have your Pulse ability, which in some situations is going to be more beneficial than some of your attacks. And in other situations, your attacks are going to be more beneficial. So you have choices. I've said this many, many times before. Bad game design, or good game design gives you choices. Bad game design gives you right answers. And so the pulse effects are not so powerful that they are a right answer. They are always the right thing to do, but they're useful enough that they're always going to be a choice for you. And then you also have a dismiss effect. So how do we turn this into Dragoon summons? Well, on the more basic side, Dragoons have what are called Dragoon editions in The Legend of Dragoon, which is basically they just have a cool combo attack. And instead of pressing buttons every time you hit, you get this little dial and it spins around. And every time it gets to the top, you have to press the button. And it is the most difficult thing to time in all of existence. I don't know why. I'm a musician. I have perfect pitch. I have an internal metronome where I can keep time without an external source really, really well. I cannot time these damn button presses. It is so difficult. But if you pull it off, you get this really cool, epic thing. Like Dart, dashes forward and stabs them, brings his sword out and goes like, and he's like flying around going like, and then finally, his final things, he goes, and then he just jumps straight up, and he brings his sword down, you watch his wings flare, and then there's this big old explosion. And it's super cool. So, at the very basic of it, you can use the Pulse as their Dragoon edition. And again, I highly recommend, just like we did with regular editions, write out a little description of what your Dragoon edition looks like. And you can use it with any weapon that you want. Again, the way that you build characters in Fabula Ultima is they're a combination of classes. So if anyone wants to be a Dragoon in this Legend of Dragoon campaign, all they need to do is take one level of Arcanist. And then they can have two other classes that are whatever in the world that they want. And then if they want their Dragoon form to become more powerful, they invest more levels in Arcanist. And if they're fine with relying more on their other classes to become more powerful, just because you're not leveling the Arcanist doesn't mean that it gets less powerful. over time. All of these classes are designed that you don't have to master them in order for them to be useful at level 1 or level 50, which is the max. That's one thing you can do. For the dismiss effect, Dragoons have Dragoon magic, and the way that it works in the game is when you first get your Dragoon spirit, you have 20 magic points, and the only way to spend magic points is in your Dragoon form. And you will have one spell, and the spell costs 20 magic points, and it does crap tons of damage. Dragoon magic is extremely good in the game, and if you can use your Dragoon magic and also get like type vulnerabilities, like using fire against ice, you can one-shot most creatures in the game, and bosses will take massive chunks of their HP just gone. So they're really, and they also look super flashy. So your dismiss effect for your Dragoon spirits, again, should be something that you create with the players. Like, instead of just using sample arcana that they have in here, they do recommend that you build your own arcana. Arcana, that's what they're called. They recommend that you build your own. And so with each character that wants to be a Dragoon, you don't have to be a Dragoon. In the same way that you don't have to take the Arcanist class. Everything else is going to make you feel very powerful. And there's at least one Dragoon that you actually, as part of the story, you don't actually have to get their Dragoon spirit. So one of the characters, Kongol, can actually go through the entire game without becoming a Dragoon. And still be a really viable character, depending on how you play and how much you like him. Because he's just big, beefy boy. So not everyone has to take a Dragoon, but it's very easy that after a level up, you just go, well, we're going to give you this level of Arcana, and that gives you the ability to summon your Dragoon spirit. You can design each one. Again, highly recommend sticking to the elements. There's 8 element types in Fabula Ultima. So it'll be very easy to kind of tie Dragoons to specific elements and stuff like that without difficulty whatsoever. And so that's the simple way to kind of deal with that. Now, obviously, as you invest more in the Arcanist class, and especially, I really like the rework, because again, with those pulse effects, it just makes it feel better. And for our particular example, it just makes it feel more like a Dragoon. You also have a bunch of skills here that just make your Arcana more powerful. So just leveling up your Arcanist will simulate the same thing as leveling up your Dragoon spirit. And if you do want, because as Dragoon spirits level up, you would eventually get 4 magic spells. You generally would have a single target spell. You would have a multi-target spell. And then depending on the Dragoon, some of them would have healing spells. Some of them would have buff spells. The third one was always kind of unique to whatever the Dragoon was. And then the final spell was a dragon summon. And the way that I see us dealing with that is actually using a heroic skill. Heroic skills are something that happened in Fabula Ultima. Basically, once you get a class to level 10, you have maxed out that class. You have mastered that class. And when you do that, you get to choose a heroic skill. And the heroic skills are a lot of different really interesting things. Like, if we look at the heroic skills in the core book, that I totally just lost. There we go. Like the perfect aim for the sharpshooter. The sharpshooter has an ability called Warning Shot that I really, really like, that allows you to basically forgo doing damage to do things like inflicting a status or draining their mind points. You have a couple different choices you could make. Perfect aim allows you to choose 2 of those options instead of just 1. So there's lots of cool heroic skills that modify how existing skills work. And if we go to the Fabula Ultima Atlas of High Fantasy, which is the first kind of rules supplement that they released I think this past summer is when they released it. I got it as soon as it was out because I was obsessed with the system. They have a heroic skill called Grand Summoning. And it's very technical because what it's doing could be game breaking if done wrong. So I'm not going to give all the rules. Go out and buy the book. But effectively, it allows you to summon your Arcana as an additional character on the battlefield. So it basically gives them physical form. There's a bunch of rules about how that works. But for the dragon summons, in Legend of Dragoon, the dragon summons were almost never used by players because they were really expensive. They would use most of your magic points. So you would generally only be able to use them once without drinking something to restore your magic points. And they didn't do a ton of damage. They were area attacks and they looked pretty cool, but they generally just didn't do a lot of damage, and they couldn't really be justified with how much mana it cost to take them. You could use that mana on lower level spells and just do better stuff. And it's one of the things that I think was a problem with the original game, is like the dragon summons should feel really, really cool, and they just don't. And nobody ever used them other than to just see the summon sequence, because they are very cool sequences for a PlayStation 1 game. So the Grand Summoning, I feel, fixes the problem that the Legend of Dragoon had, where you can just say that I have summoned my dragon, and now it can fight alongside me for a little bit. Again, there are limitations to this. You have to have specifically mastered the Arcanist class, and you can't take it until you're a certain level. Again, go buy the book for the specifics. And that does fall in line with how the Dragon Summon magic worked in Legend of Dragoon. You couldn't get it until you got your Dragoon to level 5. Grand Summon kind of fits the same thing, and again, it gives you a really, really cool way it gives you a really cool way to kind of summon your dragon spirit after you have spent a lot of time mastering your dragoon spirit. And then there's a few other heroic skills. And in the playtest, because they changed how all the skills work, they do have tips on how to change Grand Summoner because of just how they changed how the physical class works. There's a few things that just don't work the same way anymore. So they have some slight modifications so it'll work with the new system. But even the core book has a skill called Revelation, which basically the way that Revelation is supposed to work in the core game is you basically the thing with Arcanists is they can get multiple summons, and the thing with Dragoons is most Dragoons don't. In fact, you're not supposed to be able to get a second and resonate with a second Dragoon spirit. However, slight spoiler alert for the game, the main character eventually resonates with another Dragoon spirit and actually gets the ability to turn into a completely different Dragoon for the final fight of the game, which is cool. I think the design of that Dragoon armor and everything is just nowhere near as cool as his regular armor, but things. And so Revelation basically allows you to basically build your own Arcana, and also allows you to spend Fabula points to use the dismiss effect without actually dismissing it. So by using Revelation, you can basically make your Dragoon magic more powerful, in the idea that you can just use it more often, which is again something that happened in the game just by gaining levels, and there was an accessory you could buy that would double your magic points. It allows you to just use your Dragoon magic more. So we have that same thing in Revelation, and again, it requires you to invest and work with the Dragoon spirit in order to do that. And then the other thing, if you do want like multiple spells or anything like that, if you want to stick with directly how the rules work, you can technically, if you want like a higher level spell or something, you can basically just find a new, mechanics wise, you can create a new arcanum, and use that as use the different dismiss effect as your different spell thing, or you can just add basically a choice of dismiss effects. In the core book, there's actually, I know there's at least one, I think there's maybe two, that actually give you a choice of your dismiss effects. So that could be another thing that would be very, very easy to, anytime you want to add an additional magic spell to them, probably in accordance to levels up or even mastering the class, you can go, well, we're going to give you another dismiss effect for that. It's a really, really simple fix. It doesn't particularly break anything because you have to choose between one or the other. And unless you have Revelation, there's no way for you to use both of them with the same summon. And again, Revelation is supposed to be a reward for mastering, putting a full 10 levels into a single class. That's what it's designed to do. So, yeah. Overall, I guess we can say final thoughts. I think this would make a really fun RPG to play. And again, it doesn't take massive amounts of changes, which is what, if this series continues, if you like this, put in the comments and this may become a regular thing. But if this series continues, that's going to be kind of the point of it. Yes, you could just create your own RPG system to mimic whatever your favorite game or book or movie or whatever. You could do that. But that is a lot of work. And so the entire purpose of this series is, let's take something that already exists and make some minor modifications to make it emulate the spirit of what we want to do without having to basically reinvent the wheel. And I think this does this very well. Again, the two big things that makes the Legend of Dragoon different from other RPGs, other than the world, which you can take the world of Legend of Dragoon and use any RPG system you want to play in that world. It's a campaign setting. It's remarkably simple. I can play Dungeons and Dragons in that. It's just the world that you play in. Not super difficult. But the mechanics, the things that people remember most about Legend of Dragoon are the additions and the Dragoon transformations. And using a combination of just kind of renaming the special attacks that are already built in, and some of the spells that are already built into the game here, and then making some minor modifications to the Arcanist, which is already designed to be something that you modify because you're going to be making your own Arcanums anyway. So by doing those minor changes, you now have something that feels very similar to the Legend of Dragoon without having to worry about, well, is that balance? Is that not balance? How are we going to handle this mechanic? How are we going to... No, we already have the mechanics in place. We just have to change some names and make some minor adjustments that don't make massive changes to how the game is played. So yeah. Brain is just gone. That is going to be all for me today. As always, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important in the comments down below. First of all, what do you think of my Legend of Dragoon tabletop RPG? And if you guys have any ideas, especially if you're fans of Legend of Dragoon, if you have any ideas for things that I didn't think about mechanics-wise, put them in the comments down below. Otherwise, what other game, book, TV show, whatever, would you like to see me turn into a tabletop RPG? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.